Hey folks, Chris here, Dirty Rooster Off-Road, and I think we have something that's going to be pretty useful for everybody. As everybody knows, we're running shock therapy on all of our buggies. To be honest, we haven't been really pleased with the shock body wear that we've been seeing, especially on the Pro XP. The RS1 has not been so bad. We're going to show you the Pro XP as well. So with this next Pro XP build that we're working on, we're going to try some different springs. Talk to a couple different vendors out there, and we landed on Schmidty Racing. So that's what we have here in front of us, a dual rate spring set from Schmidty Racing. We're going to get that put on the other Pro XP, that's Dale's Pro XP. And hopefully we won't have the body wear that shock therapy has. Schmidty Racing assures me that they haven't had any of those problems. Also with these, we're told we don't need the limit straps on the front. We do run limit straps on the front of the Pro XP and the RS1 and the XP 1000 that we had shock therapy on. So it'll be nice to not have to do that. We'll see if that's really true. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get these open and let's see what we think. I will tell you right off the bat, these are not packed as well as shock therapy. I'm sure that whenever I get inside, I'm going to see the same thing because I can feel that the springs are kind of loose in here. So if you look in here, you can see, you know, they've got the springs wrapped up. They are wrapped up nicely. We've got some paper in here, and we've got some foam. With the shock therapy springs, they actually injection mold the foam in here, so it's a really nice fit. Let's get these open. This looks to be a lower. These are Eibach springs. They have them marked here. This is the front main, so this is a front lower spring. This is the front tender, so this is the upper for the front. I'm told that these are larger in diameter than the shock therapy springs, but we'll get the shock therapy shocks off with the springs. We'll look at the body wear, and then we'll compare the diameter of the springs. This is another front tender. Well, I didn't expect that bag to be sealed. So I assume these are crossover rings, and they are. So we've got crossover rings for the front and the rear. I'm not going to take these out of this bag. And then we have a set of instructions. We've got the invoice. And then we've got the instructions here. And of course we've got some stickers. Oh, these are stickers for on your shocks. That's pretty cool. right, so this is going to most likely be a front main. You can see, you know, the packing is not the greatest, but nothing's damaged, nothing's marked so far. That's another front main. Then we're going to get into the rear mains. These do feel like they could be a little bit wider. I would say, yeah, they're definitely wider in diameter, you know, in this dimension. They give us new sliders. Trying to see if these have any markings on them at all. These are actually Fox Racing sliders. Interesting. But that's a rear main. You can see there. Slider. Rear tender. So they're definitely, the diameter of the springs themselves are not as heavy. So I'm not going to take out the other ones because I got to box them back up anyway and transport them. That'll be less for me to mess around with, but we're excited to try these out. And we're going to take you along the journey. We're going to compare them to what we have on the shock therapy machines. And we will then, after this video, make sure you hit the like and subscribe, the alerts bell as well, so that you can see the long-term update. We'll see if these have the same shock rub problems that the shock therapy has had for us, and if really foregoing the limit straps is a viable option. Okay, so we got the front shock off the Pro XP. You can see here there's some wear, definitely from the divider. Not too bad on the front. I'm not overly concerned about this. You'll see on the back that there's much greater concern. So no wear on that side. You can see it's moved around a little bit because we're trying to change the clocking, but it doesn't really help that much. Now if we go over here, what we see here are the Schmidty Racing fronts, and then right beside it are the shock therapy fronts. And these are set up for about the same weight, pretty close. As you can see here, the Schmidty Racing, they come with iBox springs. I'm not sure if the, you know, who makes the shock therapy springs. I know they say they have them made. Not sure who's manufacturing them for them. So what I did was took some measurements with the calipers, comparing these two brands, and the main spring for Schmidty is 12 inches long and 0.534 inches in coil diameter here. Both of the brands have a 3.065 inch diameter inside this ID. Over on the shock therapy, the mainspring is actually 14 inches long, and it has a 0.585 inch coil diameter. So without knowing the exact material of the springs, you might be able to assume that this is a stiffer spring just because it's a little bit thicker, but I don't have anything to really back that up. You can use those values for what you wish. And then if we look at the front tender spring for the Schmidty Racing iBox, it is 8 inches long with a 0.493 coil diameter, and shock therapy is 6 inches long with a 0.493 spring diameter. So the coil itself between these two is pretty much the same. The difference is the length. So what's interesting is both of these, so this one totals 20 and this one totals 20. So they're giving you the same length, but they're changing the length of the actual mainspring versus the tender spring between the two. So that's the big difference there. All right, so now we have the rear walker off of the Pro XP, and you can see here where the springs have been rubbing. And obviously you can see, because they're rubbing in different places, that we have been trying to clock them differently. But no matter what, we end up with rubbing. And I'm going to get a straight edge here so that maybe you can see, you know, how much rubbing there is. It's kind of hard for me to see. These two spots aren't so bad. Those are the more recent ones. And then there's this that is considerably worse. And also, if you look at the crossover ring, it's very worn. I've got new crossover rings to put on these, so I'm going to get them put on. And of course, the Shock Therapy crossover rings come with a red O-ring that goes in here to quiet the divider when it hits it. These are the crossover rings that come with the Schmidty set. Obviously, they don't have any type of silencer, but these rubber O-rings, the silencers blew out of there pretty quickly, and I don't really notice any noise, so I'm not too worried about it. These are a little beefier also. Not sure if beefier is good, but they are, and we're going to give them a shot. So now let's take a look at the difference in the springs. These are the Schmidty springs. Again, Eibach. These are Eibach springs. I don't know if you can see that. And they mark them for you. So this is the rear main. This is the rear tender. These are the Shock Therapy springs for the rear. You can notice that there are height differences between the tenders and also the main springs. The mains are longer on the Schmidty sets. So let's compare. Shock Therapy main is 0.547 coil diameter to 15 7/8 inch long, and the Schmidty Eibach is 0.608 coil diameter to 18 inches long. The Shock Therapy tender is 0.54 inches coil diameter and 12 inches long. And then the Schmidty rear tender is 0.46 inch coil diameter and 10 inches long. So much like we saw on the front springs, they are different heights between the two brands, but they both end up pretty much the same. So this is 28 inches for Schmidty, and then this is 27 7/8 inches for Shock Therapy. So Shock Therapy is just a little bit shorter, 1/8 of an inch. Now the benefit of Schmidty is supposed to be that we won't get any of this weird shock rubbing. Schmidty claims that that does not happen with their sets. That would make us really happy if it didn't. I am curious to see how that's going to go, and given that the springs are all about the same length, I would expect some, similar deflection in the springs. But we'll see. We're going to get these installed on Dales. That will be another segment, still the same video, but we're going to change locations. We're going to go up to our riding area near Houtzdale, Pennsylvania, and we're going to get these springs installed on Dales Pro XP. So here we are, finally. It's been a few weeks since we got the Schmidty Racing springs in, and we walked through the specs. So now we're finally up at Dale's place, and we're going to get these installed on his Pro XP. So we're skipping back to the rear shocks. They started us on the front, but we started on the back, so that's what we're going to do. Okay, so what it's going to have us do is run the preload collar all the way to the top of the shock, as far up as it'll go. And then it's going to have us put the crossover rings 3.5 inches from the preload collar. That's going to get it pretty high on the shock. So I'm not sure if we're going to stay there, but that's what we're going to do next. They're going to have us put the 10-inch tender spring on, the new spring separator with the long leg pointed away from the tender spring, which is how it should be, followed by the main spring. And then we're going to just reinstall everything, just like we did here. So Dale is right now cleaning up the shock, so we'll see how that goes. It says basically what we're going to do is, they're saying use a spanner wrench. We've got this cool tool, so we're not using a spanner wrench. We're not going to need to do that. Adjust the preload, entire spring stack 1 inches. This should give you a total spring stack length of 27.5 inches. This is the rough starting point. So the way that they're going to have us check our ride height is to check the amount of shaft that's exposed after the car is settled and we've got all the scrub out of it. So they're looking for 9 3/8 to 9.5 inches of exposed shaft. So that's pretty easy. I think I might like that better than the other measurement. Well, we'll see. So here's one point. When I talked to Schmidty, they said they have no issues at all with shock body wear, which we have with the shock therapy. And based upon the measurements that we made, I expect that we're going to have shock body wear on these as well. I don't think it's going to be any different because the spring lengths are all the same. The rates are just slightly different. So there's a note in here that says if you are riding in mud, it's highly recommended that you run shock outer wears to keep abrasive mud sand from between the spring slider and shock body. Haven't heard of shock outer wears. I'm going to look them up for sure. But then it goes on to say it will cause rapid body wear if you're running in mud without the shock overs. So that's something that we're trying to prevent here. I guess we're going to see how that all goes. But let's get these installed here quick. Yeah. So you can see here, these are the shock or the stock shocks with the stock springs. So I mean those dividers do wear the shock body, and then when you stack up these other springs that are much longer and much stronger, they get a little more bow in them, and then you get a little more shock wear. So we're going to see how that goes with Schmidty, see if it's any better than shock therapy. We've got the crossover ring set to 3.5 inches from here, so I used this surface, that surface there, not this surface, and the top of the ring. 3.5 inches. And then what they want us to do is throw the springs on and then adjust this preload ring 1 inch from the top here. But we're not going to do that because that's harder than it needs to be given the tools that we have. So we're just going to adjust this up 1 inch, and then we'll throw the springs on and get everything compressed. All right, so there's 1 inch. Now we're going to go ahead and stack these springs on here. So the first one that we have is the rear tender that's going to go on the top. This shock is upside down, so we're going to make sure that the eye block is also upside down. That sits there like this. These are the new dividers. They're actually Fox Racing. I don't know if you can see that, but it says Fox right here. You're going to want the short end on this side, and you're going to want the long end up if the shock is upside down, long end down if the shock is right side up. Now we have here the rear main. You can see they just write it on there with Sharpie. Again, we're going to have the eye block upside down because we're upside down. Now the general rule of thumb, at least with shock therapy, is that you want the ends of these springs to be opposite of each other. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It probably tells me in the instructions. I'm going to check it here in a minute. The nice thing about the Walker Evans dividers is they actually have arrows on here so you can see, you know, when you're exactly 180 out. And that's pretty close. Let me look at this. See, this is another thing that I've noticed with messing with these shocks, is if you spin if you spin this around, you can actually see where it wants to kind of balance and center itself, which might be the right answer. And what's interesting is that right now I have clearance all the way around the shaft and this bumper, and the ends of the springs are actually exactly lined up, which is a little, well, it's definitely different than what they tell us to do. But we might try that to see if we can get this thing to stack more squarely and not rub the shock body. All right, so I did a little bit of research, but as you can see here, based upon how the instructions tell us to set up the preload is 1 inch up. If I look up here, I can put everything on the end of this shock and the springs don't touch it. No bueno. I'm not sure if I'm reading the instructions wrong or whatever. So bottom line is I just referred to Shock Therapy's directions, and I'm going to set this preload to 5 inches the way that they suggest, and I'm going to set this crossover ring to 11 inches, and that's going to be our starting point. We'll see how that goes. I do like how Schmidty is having us measure the length of this shaft to set the ride height. So we're gonna try that on this and see how that works out. All right, let's do it. I guess I'll take this off. Ouch.
Yeah, so basically you would just have to crank that after the spring's on, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to...
And then I don't want to do that shit, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even want to do this right now. Like, spin this up by hand. If I'd have known that it needed to be 11 inches, I'd have just put it on at 11 inches.
Right.
Now, I could loosen the screws and stuff, but sometimes it's challenging to get these the the threads to line up with these crossover rings. So I'm just gonna go with what I got. When we do the other back, we're just gonna set it to this right off the bat. Now you'll see, obviously, when we get these spring packages on here, that things are going to be, you know, the springs are going to be up over this.
Right.
It's going to require me to compress it. So
Now you have to tighten.
we'll have to tighten that once we get everything adjusted. Now we're going to put this back on, and we'll do the other side. We're not going to make you watch the other side. We'll show you the front then, and then we're going to adjust it. All right, so we got the fronts off. I understand what Schmidty's saying now. So what they're basically saying is, you know, get everything on the shock assembled with the perch down here and the crossover. Basically run this down until it just starts to compress everything, not compress it a lot, and then you tighten the preload on this. On the fronts it's 1 5/8 inches. On the rears it's 1 inch to start. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just gonna, because I already did the backs, kind of like shock therapy prescribes. That's what I'm gonna do here, and we're gonna run this basically from here to here is gonna be 2.5 inches, and then from here to the bottom of the crossover ring is gonna be 5 inches. And again, these are just our starting points. We're going to adjust these once we get Dale in his machine and get the scrub out, figure out exactly where everything is. It's going to get adjusted anyway. So, interesting note. The crossover rings, the Allen screws are a different size on the front than the rear, so I got to find a different Allen wrench. Alright, so we have the crossover ring ready to go. And set this to 5 inches. I'm going to use a marker to mark this where we need this to be. Where are you going?
Nowhere.
You want to go over here?
Huh.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna go get a drink.
Alright, so now we've got our preload and our crossover set, and we're going to get our springs put back on. So, front tender on the top, Eibach upside down because we got our springs upside down. going to reuse our divider, which actually we should clean this first. Let's clean that up a bit first before we put it on. Short side goes towards the top of the shock, like that. We do reuse the stock ones. We're going to put our front main on, Eibach upside down. And we are actually going to do something slightly different, and this is what they call for from Schmidty. They call for you to line up the tangs this way, or the ends of the springs, slight overlap there. And that is actually what I found on the first rear that we did, is that seems to center the spring better. I did that before I read all the instructions, so that's great news. We're going to do that to my Pro XP and see if that helps the shock rub. We'll see what happens here. Alright, so we got all the shocks set up, got them installed, and now we're just going to run this thing backwards or forward and backward a few times to get the scrub out. Bring it all the way in this time. That's good. Now what we're looking for, I know on the back we're looking for 9.5 inches of shaft length outside of the shock body. And it was pretty close when we checked that just a few minutes ago. And then up front, we're looking for 5 7/8 to 6 inches. So we'll see how close that is. If they're close, then we're going to call it good. We'll have to reset our crossover rings just to make sure they're good. We'll tighten them down, and that'll be it. But rarely do shock adjustments go that easily. So let's see what we got. So what did they say, 5 7/8? So that needs, I'd say they need a little more preload. Like a lot more preload. So those need more preload. And these need more preload. So that's about 5/8. We need about 5/8 more preload on those. 5/8 on the back. And we need, shoot, 1 inch on the front. Drag on. All right, so now's the fun part. You got to tear it all back apart again and adjust them, but it's going to go a lot faster this time. All right, so it took a little while, but we got her done. Lots of iteration on getting the preload right, and then of course getting the crossovers locked down. But you can see we've got a good bit of clearance back here, actually more than shock therapy would prescribe. It's probably over 16 inches, might be close to 17. I'll measure it here in a minute. based upon what Schmidty is saying, we've got these measurements just about right, 9 3/8 inches on the shaft length, and then with all of the load off of the shock, this crossover ring was supposed to be 4 3/4 inches away from the top of the divider here, right here, not here, but up here. And it just seemed like if I put that up there another almost an inch, this divider would never be able to hit that, because this would probably, even fully compressed, it would take up the space and prevent this from engaging. So I put this at 4 inches. The fronts, it's a little dark, but the fronts from the bottom to the shock body, it's about 6 inches. It's a little less than 6 inches, so that's what we're going to roll with, though. And then this up here was the crossover ring, I believe, was like 2 3/4, but I'll double check that. Well, we got a lot of ride height back, so I'll do a quick measurement here and let you know what that's all about. So we've got about 15.5 up front, 16.5 in the back. Those measurements are typically a little bit different. Let me look here. So based upon shock therapy, the front should be a 1/2 inch taller than the back. We're 16.5 in the back, 15.5 in the front. We're going to go ahead and let the springs settle, and we're going to run them a little bit. At 400 miles, we should probably check everything again, and then we'll make the final adjustments. But the experience is not really different. Springs are springs. I do like measuring that shaft length. That seems pretty slick. And actually, because the shaft length up front is just a little bit shy of where it should be, about a 1/2 inch, that's pretty much reflected in the clearance up front. So if we had that extra 1/2 inch, we'd have 16 inches up front.
That's what she said.
Yeah. So all right, that's it, wrapped up. We'll let you know how the shock wear goes and what we think about the handling. We'll do a short-term or a long-term review or something like that. Dirty Rooster's out.